Good afternoon, I'm Bkhara and you are watching AnewZ. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. U.S. federal court blocks Trump from imposing sweeping global tariffs. Russia says the second round of direct peace talks with Ukraine will be held in Istanbul on June the 2nd. South Korea begins early voting ahead of the presidential election. A United States trade court has blocked President Donald Trump's plan to impose new tariffs. The ruling says the president went beyond his legal authority by targeting countries that sell more to the United States than they buy. The decision could have major implications for America's trade policy and global markets.
The U.S. Court of International Trade has ruled against President Donald Trump's move to impose broad tariffs on imports. The court said that regulating trade with other countries is a power given only to Congress by the U.S. Constitution. That authority cannot be overridden by the president's use of emergency powers. A panel of 3 judges said they were not judging whether the tariffs were effective or not. They ruled that the law simply does not allow the president to act in this way. Soon after the decision, the Trump administration filed an appeal. The case will now move to a higher court and could eventually reach the U.S. Supreme Court. Despite the setback, Trump might still be able to temporarily impose import taxes of up to 15% for 150 days on countries with which the US runs a substantial trade deficit. The ruling notes that a president has this authority under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. While tariffs must typically be approved by Congress, Trump has argued that he has the power to act independently in response to trade deficits, which he describes as a national emergency. The White House said the U.S. trade deficit is a national emergency that has hurt American workers and weakened key industries. The court, however, did not address whether this claim was true or false. Tariffs have been a key part of President Trump's trade policy. He has argued that they help bring manufacturing jobs back to the US and reduce the country's large trade deficit. But many companies have struggled to adjust to sudden changes in trade rules. Financial markets reacted positively to the court's decision. The US dollar strengthened against major currencies, and stock markets in Asia and the US saw gains. If the decision stands, it could limit how much power the president has to set trade policy alone. This case may now shape the future balance between Congress and the White House in controlling international trade.
The United States has imposed new export restrictions to China. The Department of Commerce has sent letters to dozens of companies, informing them that a license will now be required to export products to the Chinese market. The restrictions target strategic goods, particularly chip design software and aviation technologies.
The U.S. administration has introduced new rules to limit the export of strategic products to China, according to Reuters. The Department of Commerce has sent letters to dozens of companies, informing them that a special license will be required to ship products to the Chinese market. The restrictions cover electronic design automation software for semiconductors, chemicals, butane and ethane gases, industrial machinery, and aviation technologies. Companies such as Cadence, Synopsys, and Siemens EDA are directly affected by these measures. Synopsys earns 16% of its revenue, and Cadence 12% from the Chinese market. Synopsys CEO stated that the company has not yet received any official notification. Following the news, shares of both companies dropped significantly, but Synopsys' unchanged revenue forecast helped their stocks partially recover. Experts view this move as an escalation in the technological competition between the US and China. The White House has not yet commented on the matter.
U.S. President Donald Trump has called for Harvard University to limit its intake of foreign students to 15%, criticizing the institution for what he described as a disrespect toward the country. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office on Wednesday, Trump said too many international students were taking spots that should go to Americans. Harvard stated in court documents that international students make up about 25% of its full-time student body. The university has rejected government requests for foreign students conduct records and audits on viewpoint diversity. Tensions are rising between Harvard University and the Trump administration. At the center of the dispute over international students, there are accusations of anti-Semitism and the controversial push to reshape U.S. higher education. As the legal battles unfold, analysts warn the consequences could reshape academic freedom and America's global academic standing.
In a legal twist, a U.S. judge has temporarily halted the Trump administration's effort to block Harvard University from enrolling foreign students, a policy that critics say is politically motivated and unprecedented. The administration argues the move is a response to anti-Semitism on campus, but Harvard calls it retaliation and part of a wider campaign by the Trump White House to pressure institutions it views as politically hostile.
How is this going to impact Harvard? Immensely. Almost a quarter, 25% of their enrollment is international students. And Secretary Noem pointed out that Harvard is very wealthy and that they will be fine without this tuition to, as she put it, pad their endowment. So I just want to make clear that tuition dollars don't go into endowments. Tuition money is used for things like student aid, student programs, payroll, paying staff, paying faculty. And so the loss of tuition is not going to hurt Harvard's endowment. It's going to hurt their ability to take care of the students, faculty, and staff that they have.
The policy was announced in a letter from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, a move experts say is unusual, as visa matters for universities typically fall under education or immigration authorities. Meanwhile, President Trump has doubled down on his stance, suggesting foreign students who protest U.S. policy shouldn't be allowed in.
Why are they there? And then you see those same people picketing and screaming at the United States and screaming at, they're anti-Semitic or they're something. We don't want troublemakers here.
Trump and his allies argue elite universities are ideological battlegrounds. Analysts warn the broader academic community may also be in the administration's crosshairs.
But perhaps this was not necessarily just about Harvard. This was a message to all of higher education that you have to come into line with the thinking of what this administration thinks higher education.
The potential impact stretches far beyond Harvard. With over 1.2 million international students in the US, many of whom pay full tuition, experts warn that policy shifts could strain university budgets and affect research funding nationwide. The administration is also taking steps to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status and freeze billions in federal research funding.
Another action that the administration is trying to take against Harvard is to revoke their tax-exempt status, which, again, based on their very large endowment, would cause Harvard to then owe a tremendous amount of money in taxes.
President Trump has described tax-exempt status as a privilege, not a right. Meanwhile, some academic experts express concern over proposed campus surveys, drawing comparisons to past periods of political scrutiny in American history.
I think the number is about $2.75 billion that they have immediately taken from Harvard. Faculty at Harvard are very concerned, talking about how the revocation of that amount of funds, what that's going to do is essentially shut down some of their labs. We've talked about how universities in America are vital for all kinds of research, but particularly scientific research. And so revoking those funds without a very clear reason or without a very clear process is incredibly harmful to Harvard.
The court's decision offers temporary relief for Harvard, but broader legal and policy questions remain unresolved.
Elon Musk has announced his departure from the Trump administration, marking the end of his 130-day tenure as a special government employee. In a post on X, Musk thanked President Donald Trump for the opportunity to lead the Department of Government Efficiency. The White House confirmed Musk's exit, stating that the offboarding process began Wednesday evening. His departure comes shortly after he publicly criticized a key part of Trump's legislative agenda. The second round of direct Russia-Ukraine peace negotiations will be held in Istanbul on June the 2nd, according to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said during his visit to Berlin that Kyiv is still waiting for Moscow's memorandum on how it saw the future of peace talks.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that the next round of direct talks with Ukraine will take place in Istanbul on June 2nd. Ankara has reiterated its readiness to host these talks, with Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan expressing commitment to facilitating peace between the two nations. Officials confirmed Ankara's readiness to host the negotiations.
Russia preferring Istanbul for direct negotiations with Ukraine is a reflection of the mutual understanding of our countries regarding the establishment of stability.
Turkey's foreign minister will travel to Kyiv on Thursday for a two-day visit after discussing peace efforts to end Russia-Ukraine war in Moscow earlier this week, Turkish Foreign Ministry confirmed. US officials suggested that Geneva could serve as the venue for future talks, highlighting Switzerland's traditional neutrality and infrastructure for high-level diplomacy. Russia has rejected the Vatican as a serious venue for talks, citing non-neutral behaviour and limited logistical capacity. However, no agreement has been finalised. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Berlin to meet with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. The two leaders discussed continued German support for Ukraine and efforts toward a ceasefire.
Unsere Verteidigungsminister werden heute eine Absichtserklärung.
Today, our defence ministers will sign a declaration of intent on the procurement of long-range weapons systems from Ukrainian production, so-called long-range fires. There will be no range limitation. This will enable Ukraine to defend itself fully, including against military targets outside its own territory.
Auch gegen militärische Ziele außerhalb des eigenen.
Today, two sides will sign respective documents which will mark the beginning of financing of the new projects. These new projects already exist. We just want them to be in the amount that we need. The first steps on financing the projects will be taken today.
In the United States, President Donald Trump warned Russian President Vladimir Putin against further escalation in Ukraine, stating that he is playing with fire. Trump also mentioned ongoing dialogue with Putin, suggesting progress toward a peace memorandum and ceasefire agreement. The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said it was clear the Trump administration is making considerable efforts towards a peaceful settlement and that Russia was grateful for the mediation efforts of President Trump personally. But Peskov said, just like the United States, Russia has its own national interests.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed that Russia has amassed more than 50,000 troops, including some of its most elite forces near the Sumy region, while Kyiv is reportedly taking active measures to prevent a large-scale Russian offensive. The timing of this build-up raises concerns, particularly as Moscow signals readiness for a summer push and stalls ceasefire talks until it submits its own conditions. To help us assess the strategic and political dimensions of this situation, we are joined from Lisbon by Anna Evans, a respected political analyst. Anna, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, good morning, thank you.
Anna, what do you think? Why Russia is concentrating such a significant force near the Sumy region specifically, and what strategic objectives might it have in that area?
Well, what we know is that several thousand troops have been placed in the northeast region of Sumy on the Russian border. And there are two possibilities. One is that Russia is creating a border buffer, so Russia intends to move inside the Ukrainian border and create kilometers of buffer, not only in that specific region, but also in other regions as well, to make it very hard for Ukraine to concentrate on a single line. the worst possible case scenario is that Russia is preparing a more invasive occupation on those areas. So the least forceful scenario is a buffer zone. The worst scenario is a more invasive operation. Now, the issue is that if we think about what President Trump said already a couple of days ago, President Trump was saying that President Putin was becoming mad and that there was no way Russia would invade Ukraine in other areas. Unfortunately, it looks like his statements hinted at what is precisely happening at this stage. So what we are hoping at a large international level is that, unfortunately, there will be a massive attack over the next months. And of course, this coincides with the ongoing or maybe stalled negotiations and with also President Trump's statements that hint at his own incapacity to provide a peace deal and his fatigue regarding the situation.
Mm-hmm. I know President Zelensky has mentioned steps taken to prevent a large-scale offensive. From your perspective, what measures might Ukraine be implementing and how effective could they be against such a sizable Russian buildup?
Well, unfortunately, the news are not very, very good for Ukraine, because Ukraine, in terms of human resources, cannot compare to Russia. So in terms of military human resources, Russia always has a tremendous advantage, unfortunately, over Ukraine. So what Ukraine is doing clearly, and we can see that in this trip to Berlin, and the talks with Germany, is to amass more military equipment, more kinds of weapons with a longer range with the help of Germany. So Germany has already pledged to allow Ukraine to use its long-range weapons without limits. And so this is, of course, very helpful. Also, Ukraine is expanding its drone capacity because drones play a really important role in this war. This is the war where the drones have taken, in a very notorious way, a central role. And so, in terms of the drone industry, Ukraine also is advancing its capacity. But it is not good news. It is very hard for Ukraine to disperse in different zones, and that's precisely what Russia is obliging Ukraine to do if it invades or occupies or creates buffer zones in different regions. And we should mention that this strategy, the Sumy strategy, was planned ahead of Ukraine's occupation of a part of the Russian Kursk in the last summer. So if Ukraine had not occupied the Russian Kursk, this great intervention in Sumy would have taken place. And so this is already a second wave of a strategy that has been planned for quite a while.
Anna Evan, thank you once again for your valuable analysis and for joining us from Lisbon.
Thank you, Bakhtiar.
Thank you. South Korea began a two-day early voting period ahead of the snap presidential election scheduled on the 3rd of June next week. The vote was called after President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office following his brief imposition of martial law. By 10 o'clock in the morning, 2.3 million people of eligible voters had cast their ballots. According to National Election Commission data, a record turnout for early voting than last time in 2022. Election day will be a public holiday and results are expected to start coming in by the evening that day. South Korea's Navy says a maritime patrol aircraft with 4 people on board has crashed near a military base in the southern city of Pohang on Thursday. 3 bodies were retrieved, according to Navy. The crash occurred at around 1:49 p.m. due to an unspecified reason, and witnesses reported smoke rising from the mountain with sounds of explosions. The Navy confirmed the death of 2 of the 4 crew members who were aboard and added that no civilian casualties were reported. After more than 3 decades at the top, Japan is no longer the world's largest creditor. Germany has now claimed that title, ending a 34-year reign. Here is what that shift means for the global economy.
A major shift in the global financial landscape. Japan has lost its decades-long status as the world's top creditor. A recent Bloomberg report reveals that Germany has now taken the lead. The change comes as a result of a weakening yen, a strengthening euro, and ongoing trade tensions, particularly those tied to American tariffs, first introduced under the Trump administration. In 2024, Germany's current account surplus hit 248.7 billion euros, while Japan's reached 180 billion euros, or about 29.4 trillion yen. Germany's climb is credited to its robust trade performance, with an appreciating euro boosting its net foreign assets. Meanwhile, Japanese companies have continued expanding overseas, investing heavily in the United States and the United Kingdom. The finance, insurance, and retail sector have led the way. So what is a creditor country? It's a nation that holds more foreign assets than it owes abroad, through investments, loans, and savings. Experts also say that US tariffs have played a part, prompting Japanese companies to shift operations to avoid trade restrictions. At the same time, the euro is gaining ground as a stable and reliable reserve currency, chipping away at a long-standing confidence in the US dollar and treasury bonds. But Japan's finance minister, Katsunobu Kato, insists the ranking shift does not mark a dramatic change in the country's global position. He says, Japan's net external assets have been steadily increasing. The ranking alone should not be seen as a sign of decline. Meanwhile, China is fast closing in. With rapid international expansion, it's gaining ground on both Germany and Japan. A reshaping of the world's top creditors is underway, one that reflects shifting currencies, evolving trade routes, and new power players in the global economy.
A new intelligence report out of the United States suggests that Moscow is trying to bring Georgia back into its sphere of influence. The report also touches upon Georgia's Russian-occupied territories. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more in Tbilisi.
The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the most trusted branches of American defense analysis, has released its annual Global Threat Assessment, and Georgia is firmly on its radar. According to the report, Moscow is almost certainly seeking to bring back Georgia to the sphere of its influence. It notes that following Georgia's October parliamentary elections, the ruling Georgian Dream Party has shaped an environment that allows for deeper involvement from Russia in the country. The report also addressed Armenia, citing worsening ties with Moscow and efforts by Russia to discredit Yerevan's pro-Western leadership. This broader picture of Russian influence extends directly to Georgia's occupied territories. In Abkhazia, the de facto leadership continues to closely align with Moscow. Speaking to the Russian state media at Caucasian Investment Forum in Russia, Abkhazia's de facto president, Badr Gunba, praised Russian military forces' presence in the region, calling them essential for peace and stability. He highlighted cooperation with Russia's defense ministry and the significance of both the 7th military base and Russia's Federal Security Service border unit stationed in the region. Around the same time, Russia's defense minister, Andrei Belousov, met with Abkhazia's de facto defense chief, describing Abkhazia as a reliable ally and underlining its efforts to create a joint defense space in the framework of their strategic partnership. The statements reflect ongoing shifts of regional cooperation. As Moscow strengthens its ties with breakaway entities while distancing itself from Armenia's pro-Western leadership. It's Nini Nikolashvili reporting from Tbilisi, AnewZ.
Russian investors are looking into Afghanistan's natural resources. Following an offer for a joint oil project, a new meeting was held on investments in the country's mineral sector. Our Tamim Bahis has more in Kabul.
In another sign of growing international interest in Afghanistan's natural resources, a high-level meeting was held this week between Afghan officials and Russian private sector representatives. The acting Minister of Mines and Petroleum, Hidayatullah Badri, met with the head of the Russian company, Turkhan Extraction. During the meeting, the two sides discussed investment opportunities in Afghanistan's mineral sector, with a particular focus on jade mines. The Russian side praised the favorable investment environment in the country and expressed a clear interest in launching new projects. The acting minister welcomed the interest and assured full cooperation in line with Afghanistan's mining laws and regulations. He emphasized Kabul's commitment to facilitating responsible foreign investment in the sector. You might remember that just last month, Russian private sector investors announced a $500 million plan to build a major oil extraction plant in partnership with a local Afghan company. Now, this latest engagement in the mining sector signals a growing Russian interest in Afghanistan's vast natural resources. As Russian companies continue to explore economic opportunities in Afghanistan, officials here say they are ready to work with international partners who align with the country's investment laws and development goals. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for AnewZ.
Kazakhstan and Italy are moving to significantly deepen their economic ties, with over $8 billion in potential partnerships now on the table. Key strategic sectors like energy, agriculture, logistics and technology are all at the heart of this burgeoning cooperation. The latest development came during the Italy-Kazakhstan Supply Chain Forum held in Astana on May the 28th, which aimed to elevate bilateral trade and industrial collaboration between the two nations. Joining us from Astana to discuss the outcomes and implications of this forum is Richard Spooner, member of the advisory board at the Caspian Policy Center in Washington, D.C. Richard, welcome to AnewZ and thank you for joining us from Kazakhstan.
My pleasure to be with you today.
Richard, the figure of $8 billion in potential partnerships is substantial. Can you walk us through the sectors that are expected to drive this economic engagement? And how do you assess Italy's strategic interest in Kazakhstan and the broader Central Asian region?
Well, $8 billion is almost exactly the amount of money that Italy has invested in Kazakhstan over the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. What will be interesting right now will be to look at the focus, the projects that are chosen for this investment. In the joint communique that was issued after this meeting, Prime Minister Bkhara said that converting coal-fired energy plants to natural gas would be a priority. He also mentioned the digitalization of logistics. Those, of course, are two very timely, important projects. The petrochemical sector was also mentioned, and that's bound to be important because Eni, the Italian oil and gas company, is already a major player and has been since the 90s. So we could assume that there are going to be investments there in the two projects where Eni is a contractor. That's the Kashagan field and the Karachaganak field. I think for the rest, we'll just have to follow, see how that all shakes out.
Mm-hmm. Richard, beyond energy, logistics and agriculture were also in focus. How significant are these sectors in shaping Kazakhstan's long-term partnership with Italy and possibly the EU?
I would say that energy, of course, is the single most important source of income for Kazakhstan, and it will remain so. Mm-hmm. Logistics and energy really can be viewed together here because they come together in the Middle Corridor. Kazakhstan's biggest logistics project, the Middle Corridor, could provide even more energy to Europe, assuming that its capacities are increased, its bottlenecks are reduced. So, there's also the issue of internal Kazakh logistics, their roads, their communications, and rail travel. So I'm sure that Italy and Europe both will be looking at these areas, be wanting to do something in these sectors going forward, and not just with Kazakhstan, but with Uzbekistan, and of course with Azerbaijan as well. As to agriculture, that's a sector that needs modernization in Kazakhstan, specifically smart irrigation, improved management of water resources. To this date, Kazakhstan's record in modernizing its agricultural sector has been mixed. We'll have to see if this becomes an important part of the investments from Italy and from Europe as a whole.
So what are the key challenges or risks that could slow down or complicate this promising partnership?
Well, I think the key challenge is simply implementing projects efficiently. As far as any real impediments blocking this cooperation, I don't see any real impediments. Nobody's going to stop Europe from investing in Kazakhstan or Central Asia at large. Obviously, Europe is not the only group of countries that's interested in investing there. The big individual countries like US and China, of course, are also interested. Nothing's going to stop Europe from investing as it decides is prudent. But implementing the projects, in my mind, will be the biggest challenge, implementing them efficiently.
Richard Spurner, thank you once again for your valuable insights. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
In Bkhara, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijani media delegation journeyed through history, culture and craftsmanship, from ancient palaces to vibrant bazaars and timeless traditions kept alive by generations. Our Aliyah Aziz has more.
Today in Bkhara, our Azerbaijani media delegation had the exciting opportunity to dive deeper into the city's rich history, from exploring ancient landmarks to experiencing the vibrant atmosphere of the local market. We visited the Zardos Arts Center, owned by a goldsmith family, where traditional Uzbek clothing and Bukhara's centuries-old gold craft are preserved by artist Mahfuza Salimova, who devoted her life to preserving the tradition for over 4 decades. Next, we visited the bustling Bukhara Center Bazaar, where you can find everything from fresh vegetables and fruits to fragrant spices and dried nuts. Most notably, the traditional Uzbek naan bread stands out with its rich texture and cultural significance. Now, going into the historical point, we explored the Setorai Mohi Khosa, known as the Palace Like the Stars and the Moon, named in honor of the emir's beloved wife, Sitora, whose beauty he likened to the moon. It was constructed during the last emir of Bukhara, Mir Said Muhammad Alim Khan. If there's one thing this official media press tour through Uzbekistan proved, it's that connecting the two Turkic nations, gaining insight into Uzbekistan's media, and uncovering the country's rich history made a truly remarkable experience. This is Aliyah Aziz, reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, for AnewZ.
An international military exercise launched in central Turkey. Forces from 15 countries came together to test airborne operations and assess combat readiness. The sky over Kayseri lit up with parachutes as Turkish commandos performed a nighttime jump, marking the start of the Distinguished Observer Day of the AGS 2025 exercise, held at the Mater Lieutenant Hasanbak Drop and Jump area near Incesu. The exercise is spearheaded by the 1st Commando Brigade Command, a veteran unit known for its airborne capabilities, first showcased during the Cyprus peace operation and repeatedly tested in counter-terrorism operations. According to the scenario, parachute commandos leaped from a C-130 transport aircraft departing from the 12th Air Transportation Main Base Command. Their mission to conduct an airborne guidance operation and secure the area in preparation for a large drop of 265 parachute commandos set to take place on Wednesday. The RGS 2025 exercise brings together not only Turkish forces, but also representatives from 15 countries, including Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Bangladesh, the UAE, Brazil, Georgia, Spain, Italy, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. Both active participants and observers, these nations are contributing to the development of joint operational capabilities and interoperability. The aim is clear: to strengthen combined operations with friendly and allied nations, while testing and enhancing the airborne capabilities of Turkey's elite units. The exercise also measures combat readiness across all command levels, offering critical real-time experience in the planning and execution of operations under battlefield conditions. A special edition of News Hour is coming up tonight with a different focus. Our guy Sean will tell us what we can expect to see.
That's right, something a bit different tonight on News Hour. Azerbaijan's Health Minister Teymur Musayev joins us for an exclusive interview to talk about an exciting new partnership between Azerbaijan and China, something that's planning to benefit not just the health outcomes of people in this country, but also right across the region. That's Teymur Musayev joining us for an exclusive interview on our special edition of News Hour tonight.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.